My name is Jeffrey Hosick. I'm a veteran firefighter and a fire department chaplain, a psychotherapist, and a professional speaker. Let me tell you a few things as to why I developed this e-course. I began my emergency services career as a paramedic when I lived in a different part of the country. Now, living here, I've been with the fire service for over 20 years and a volunteer with ground search and rescue for over 5. I live close to 3 military bases, Navy, Army, and Air Force, and I've spent my career as a psychotherapist working with the military and police, dealing with devastating issues which have taken a toll on their marriages, their families, and their own mental health. I've watched my brothers and sister firefighter and paramedic and their families suffer, and I want to help. This video series is about flashbacks. What the heck are they, and how do they affect us? The purpose of the video and the video series is to shed light on 3 types of flashbacks. Because this series is about flashbacks, I must give you a warning. Your flashbacks will be triggered. This first video is designed to stand alone as a general overview. The first video, the one you're watching now, is my gift to you. It's free. For some, the general outline is all that they need. They want basic information about flashbacks and a sense of how they're dealing with them. However, some of you may be drawn to take a closer look at the topic of flashbacks by watching the other videos in their series, and some of you may choose to resolve the triggers. In summary, the video course takes you through 3 steps. The first is the overview. Step 2 digs deeper into the subject, and then finally the series offers details on how to resolve your flashbacks. You may choose to watch all the videos several times. You may also wish to invite others to watch them with you. Feel free to pause and discuss any aspects of what you hear or what flashbacks are triggered. You do not have to experience this alone in isolation. I'm pleased to be your guide on this journey. Now, to begin, let me tell you about Bob. Bob lives and works on Main Street. Every morning, Bob leaves home and he drives to work. He starts down Main Street, but takes a detour. He turns left at Lincoln, he goes 1 block, turns right, drives 1 block, turns right again, drives another block before he turns left back onto Main Street. And then he arrives at work. You'll notice Bob drives 3 sides of a square. He has his own reason for the detour. I like the trees next to the water, he says, so I give myself a moment to breathe before I get to work. So, Bob, do you ever vary that route, I ask? No, never. Even in emergencies or bad weather, I ask? Never. However, unexpectedly, one day Bob was in a taxi, which took him directly down Main Street. Halfway down the block, Bob experienced overwhelming anxiety and almost had a panic attack. That threw him off for a few days. Bob had a flashback because in the middle of the block was a church. When Bob was 7, he was sexually abused by a scoutmaster when he went to scout meetings held at that church. Flashbacks occur when our attention is drawn to an incomplete experience. Let's say we go out for dinner. We have a lovely time and share a nice meal. That experience runs its full course. We may become friends or agree to share another time together. The experience is complete. However, if during that meal you suddenly get up and slap me across the face and walk out of the restaurant, I won't know what to do. That is an incomplete experience. Does it change my understanding of you and our relationship? Did I do something wrong? The next time I see you, I will see you as if it is the next moment in our connection, even if years pass between events. There are 3 types of flashbacks. Bob had what I call the ticking jack-in-the-box. Ticking Jack-in-the-Box Type 1 flashbacks are real objects in time and space, like the church, that are directly associated with an incident and triggers us, reminding us something is incomplete, which is still having impact. We can have a flashback and not even be aware of it. Jack-in-the-Box is a familiar child's toy. As you crank the handle, the tune "Pop Goes the Weasel" plays one note at a time. Tension builds until the climactic pop and Jack jumps out of the box. If you've played with a Jack-in-the-Box, you know you can't turn the handle back. Once a note is played, the mechanism has moved on. I have a friend who tells me she used to play with a Jack-in-the-Box for hours. And even though she knew the pop was coming, it would still scare her. That is exactly how Jack-in-the-Box flashbacks work. When Bob traveled down Main Street, the tune began to play. When Bob saw the church, the flashback popped. These Jack-in-the-Boxes appear suddenly and pop. These flashbacks exist whether we're consciously aware of them or not. I'll explain this in more detail later in the series. First responders who are watching this video, this next section is for you. Here's another example of a ticking Jack-in-the-Box flashback, as experienced by Sarah, a first responder. Sarah specializes in extrication. One summer evening, her department was paged to assist with a motor vehicle accident. Arriving on scene, she's confronted by a yellow Jeep upside down in a swamp. Sarah needed to move quickly to cut open the Jeep and free the people inside. Sarah was successful, but both passengers died before she finished the extrication. Even though everyone on the scene said she did an amazing job, Sarah could only think of what would have happened if she'd moved more quickly. Maybe, just maybe, she said to herself, she could have saved a life. Sarah has a problem. She has a flashback when she sees a yellow-colored vehicle, even if it's a small foreign car or a pickup truck. Sarah has a flashback when she sees a Jeep of any color. She has a flashback when she passes that stretch on the highway where the accident occurred. She even has a flashback when she smells a swamp. The impact may lessen some over time, but the Jack-in-the-Box flashbacks are real and exist in each of these objects. We may fool ourselves to think because they become relatively less important, they're gone. Keep in mind, when flashbacks come together, the impact adds together. We teach ourselves to avoid triggers when we can. We become so good at it, we can avoid knowing why we avoid it. Sarah avoids that stretch of highway. She says she's decided to travel a different route. She may be like Bob and think it's just a preference. A ticking Jack-in-the-Box flashback seeks attention. Not all Jack-in-the-Boxes demand the same amount of attention. The ones more closely connected to the incident will have more significant association with pain and thus generate greater defensiveness. The pain is resolved when each object is free of the association it has with the event. When Sarah is healed, a yellow car is just another car. When Bob is healed, Main Street is just the shortest distance between home and work. Be careful. Do not confuse healing with denial. For some, having the strength for renewed denial will be all they need. Both Bob and Sarah have developed a pattern of avoidance to cope with their flashbacks. If you avoid the trigger, they say, there's no flashback. This avoidance helps them cope. Coping is not resolving, but coping may be good enough. It's a personal choice. Coping may be enough, but the flashbacks will still be triggered at another time and another place when you don't expect it. Bob copes by not including that part of him the abused boy, in his current self-understanding. That part of him is still present and will suddenly appear when Bob encounters a Jack-in-the-Box flashback related to the event. The church never moves. It remains inactive for Bob until he travels down Main Street in a taxi. One more thing about the ticking Jack-in-the-Box. It ticks like a clock. That's a reminder that time, seasons, and anniversary dates can be triggers for a flashback. A friend of mine, Carol, came to visit. As we sat down to tea, she said, "Jeff, you know I left that bastard cheating husband of mine back in February. It's now July, and the symptoms of critical incident stress have all returned. What's going on?" "Did anything bad ever happen to you in July?" I asked. "Any jolting experiences?" "No, July is a wonderful month. It's a vacation month," she said. "Any birthdays? Anniversaries?" Her face fell. "Yeah," she said. "We married on the 15th of July. Bingo. My friend Joe was in the Navy. He came to visit one June, telling me he didn't understand why, after a long winter, he found himself depressed in May. "May is a wonderful month. It's warming up, things are growing, but I can't seem to get out of my own way," he said. "I feel like I'm under a dark cloud." We had chatted a fair bit about a deployment he had fighting pirates and smugglers off the coast of Africa. We'd worked through many of the particulars about it. "I know we've done that work," said Joe, "but I can't seem to shake this dark cloud." Then I asked out of curiosity, "Joe, when were you deployed?" "May 21st. His voice trailed off. "That's it." He spoke as if he'd found the key to unlock a critical insight. He'd associated the changing warmer weather when the orders came down to do one more tour before shore leave. We forget painful incidents are time-stamped. Seasonal holidays can become triggers, as do special days like Mother's Day, Father's Day, Veterans Day, Remembrance Day. Valentine's Day is a strong one. Incidents are time-stamped. So let's review. Ticking Jack-in-the-Box Type 1 flashbacks are real objects in time and space, like the church, that are directly associated with an incident which triggers us, reminding us that something is incomplete, which is still having an impact, whether we're aware of it or not. Let's move on. Pandora's Box Type 2 flashbacks are much like Jack-in-the-Box flashbacks, except instead of being triggered by real objects in time and space, Pandora's Box flashbacks are indirectly connected to the event through the emotional states of overwhelm and vulnerability, reminding you there are experiences to complete. These flashbacks are frequently overlooked because we're forced to recall events that have nothing to do with what's happening at the moment. I remember explaining this dynamic in a debriefing when Brett, our participant, says, "Thank you for answering a question I've had for 40 years. Every time I'm in a stressful situation, I find myself dealing with my brother's suicide, which happened 40 years ago when I was 17. I wondered, why does this happen?" "Yes," I assured him. "When we feel vulnerable or overwhelmed, sometimes we're forced to look at issues that have nothing to do with what's happening at the moment. The trigger is the emotional state of overwhelm and vulnerability, the very states you had during that incident." So let's describe it in this way. Imagine yourself in the room and you control the lighting. There are dark shadows and bright spots. Naturally, you put the things you want to see and enjoy under the light, and you put the stuff you don't want to see in the dark places. When a vulnerable moment appears, it's like someone has reached in behind you and turned on the overhead lights, and the whole area is lit up. Everything is visible all at once. What will grab your attention? Not the things you see every day, but the things you forgot but suddenly appear. When Bob understands his identity in a particular way, and he suddenly remembers something that's outside of that identity, Bob loses his self-identity, and he isn't clear on who he is anymore. Some would describe Bob as disintegrating. He feels he is shattered into pieces. It's not that Bob is falling apart, it just feels that way. Bob faces all those experiences that are not part of his current understanding of himself. We want to look at what experiences we hold that are disintegrated and bring them together or integrate them. Our whole process is to move from the emotional state of disintegration to the emotional state of integration. In review, Pandora's Box Type 2 flashbacks are incomplete experiences indirectly connected to the event, which reside or are stored in the emotional states of overwhelm and vulnerability, reminding you there are other experiences to complete. Bob also suffers from a third type of flashback I call the black box. A black box Type 3 dynamic flashback is a recording of the verbal and nonverbal interactions of an incident. An object in time and space does not trigger it, nor is it triggered by an emotional state of overwhelm and vulnerability. Just as planes carry a black box which tracks the events of the plane's mechanics and voice recordings in the cockpit, so we too record the dynamics of a trauma, and when we perceive a replay of that event, we flash back to the past traumatic event and re-experience it as if it's happening now. The two experiences, the one from the past and the one from the present, overlap on each other, as if we have the same experience in two different events. Let me explain this by visiting Bob as an adult. Bob has a difficult time in his sex life with his wife, Linda. Bob has an overlap between sex with Linda and sex with the Scoutmaster. Thus, for Bob, sex is mechanical, emotionless, and there's little intimacy experienced between him and Linda. Many times he cannot get an erection, and he's very disconnected from Linda when they're making love. Linda notices it and assumes there must be something wrong with her, and the tension in their sex life grows. Eventually, sex happens maybe twice a year. Bob does not know a significant barrier in this problem is his experience of sexual abuse as a 7-year-old. In his teens, Bob covered this vulnerability with macho aggression and bravado. As he aged, the cover eroded, and Bob's vulnerability reemerged. As I said, Bob has an overlap between his experience with his wife and the experience with the Scoutmaster. When Bob is with Linda, he feels as if he were 7, alone, frightened, and vulnerable. The same feelings he had with the Scoutmaster. Because the flashback is in this dynamic between Bob and Linda, their problem only appears when this situation arises. Otherwise, Bob and Linda share a lovely, emotionally connected relationship. The flashback shows up only during sex. Another example of a dynamic flashback happens for Jim at his old job. Jim hated it when his boss unfolded his blame finger, what my friend Leighton calls the 10,000 psi finger, and he spoke down to him at the end of his finger. Sometimes the boss did so with a condescending comment or tone or a voice volume. When he speaks to me that way, Jim says, I feel like a little kid. So Jim is having an overlap between his experience with his boss with the 10,000 psi finger and being scolded as a child. Before I leave this section on black box type 3 flashbacks, it's essential to explain the dynamic nature of a flashback. During the memory of that event, Bob has the resources of a 7-year-old. The resources and perspectives he has accumulated over the years are not present. When Bob returns to the memory, he starts processing it where he hurts, as he hurts, at that moment. As Bob heals, he chooses to experience everything about the event. Bob intentionally creates a middle ground in himself where all experiences are permitted to be present. By that, Bob builds capacity and he develops the ability to have many experiences from many points of view. Bob can now experience his sexual abuse from the perspective of a 7-year-old and teenager and as an adult. This is what is called integration. Let's review. A black box type 3 dynamic flashback is a recording of the verbal and nonverbal interactions of an incident. An object in time and space does not trigger it, nor is it triggered by an emotional state of overwhelm and vulnerability. We are finished introducing the 3 types of flashbacks: the ticking Jack-in-the-Box type 1 flashbacks, Pandora's Box type 2 flashbacks, and the black box type 3 dynamic flashbacks. This next section leads you to what you need to know to take the next steps by answering 2 questions. What do I need, and how do I find it? For some of you, this video is all that you need. It's free. You are free. If you found it helpful, let me know. If you see it will benefit others, please pass it along. It's designed, as are all of my videos, to give you enough to make it to the end of your life on Earth, to help you find meaningful relationships, and to help you inspire your environment to greatness. Some of you will want more. Here are 4 options. If you wish to build skill, then you seek coaching to help you acquire and practice a new way of doing something. If you encounter emotional barriers skill development cannot manage, you may need counseling. Counseling is designed to help you identify an emotional blockage and create new coping skills. If in counseling you find the problem is persistent and you recognize that it is a problem or a trauma from the past, you may choose therapy. This is often more long-term and includes learning how to release learned defenses, which protect you against the memory of a traumatic event, and how to accept it as part of your new self-identity. When you've recovered enough so you feel called to help others, this is called spiritual direction. Spiritual direction is not a religious term as much as it identifies emerging values resulting in a commitment to listen, be present, and help another along the pathway of recovery. I congratulate you on taking the step on the critical journey of recovery. You may find it helpful to return and review this video. It will help you feel connected to all the others who have watched it and will watch this video in the future. By periodically reviewing it, you may find a next step or a direction for continued work. I have created a Facebook support community called the Integrity Group, where we can gather to ask questions, break isolation, share resources, and help each other form an inner graceful middle ground, allowing for all perspectives as we make peace with ourselves. The group is a support group only. It will not offer coaching, counseling, therapy, or spiritual direction. Find a person in your local area who can listen to you and gracefully accept you as being messed up, and they can help you recover at your own pace. You may choose to share this video with them as a way to find a common language to begin. This is a massive undertaking you have started. If you want more detail in each of the 3 types of flashbacks, and to find a more detailed way to resolve the impact, please continue with the next video in the series. Your servant, Jeffrey Hosick, the Firefighter Guy.